Maybe she'll go easy on
Hello. Can everybody hear okay? Okay. Thanks for coming. We have an awesome crowd. We do these artist talks every 2 months. So every 2 months we'll have a new artist on the wall and they'll come tell us more about their work, because you get to see art but not always hear about it in the stories. And I appreciate having Jenny here. It was pretty short notice actually too. We had a spot to fill and I thought of you. I've never met or spent too much time with her, formally. I know I've been in the same room at some point, but I knew she came to mind because you have a lot of work and it's big and we have a lot of walls. And on short notice, I really appreciate it because, it's hard to see blank walls around here. And I decided I haven't actually gotten to take a class of my own from Jenny. I'm an art teacher, but I decided I'm going to make it into my schedule because it sounds like you teach in town here through the college. So I'm excited to sign up for a class. She'll tell you more about her work and herself. I'll give you a little warning. I'm going to plug my computer in over here, so there's going to be a cord, but I'll unplug it after her talk so you can walk around easier. And just so you know, these are on YouTube, and we have lots of other artists for over a year now who've given talks. We missed a couple of people, unfortunately, before we started putting them on YouTube, but you can find them if you just Google YouTube and look for the Buffalo Senior Center. There's another Buffalo Senior Center apparently somewhere, and they have karaoke. So you might find some singing too. That's not us, but we do have some other musical performances and stuff on there too. So there's several hours of entertainment there for you to enjoy on our next snow day. There's probably one coming. And that's a good point too, real quick. We normally do these on the first Friday every other month, but since it was a holiday day last week, we had scheduled it for this week, and thankful because it was blizzarding and we would have had to reschedule. So things work out the way they're supposed to. And I am excited to have you here and just tell us a little bit about you and what makes you you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Denny.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank all of you for, yes, this is working. Thank you for coming, everybody. I really appreciate everybody who's made it out today. As Denny said, it was last minute, but it has been such a joy working with you. I want to thank you for making this very easy to do. And it just was like, yes, I want to get back a little to the community and share, because often I'm showing paintings far away and it's nice to be able to have them here at home. And she graciously said I didn't have to frame all of them because that would have been, as you guys know, incredibly expensive. So by making it doable, I was able to put it together, and working with Danny's been so nice because she helps hang and as an artist knows how to do it, and I can entirely trust her with the works. I also want to thank Danica Shell, I've been calling you Danica. Yep. Danica Shell. Yep. And Trey Schrodfeld, is he here today? Yep.
Trey
is not today,
works from home on Fridays. He lives in Sheridan, so
I wanted to thank him because he wrote such a nice article in the Breeze that was in March, and he really did a great job. So I want to give him a thanks, and to thank all of the Senior Center for putting this together and putting these shows together all the time, so that you guys always have something nice to look at and don't have blank walls. It's really a gift to the community. And I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about the life of a painting and what a painting goes through and how an artist makes it and puts it together, and my thoughts about it. But paintings are sort of like children, where you invest all of this time into them and you really work hard. But then ultimately you want them to go off. You want them to go away, get out of the basement and have a relationship with someone else and have a life of their own. And my goal when I'm making paintings is I really want people. I think about how somebody's going to view the paintings when they're finished. And oftentimes I work really large because I want to have that interactive sort of an experience that somebody has when they walk up to a large painting. You engage with that painting entirely differently than you do with the small painting. So you could have the same image and it could be on a postcard size canvas, or it could be, I paint as large as 12 feet across. Well, actually, my husband and Marshall Kelly and I did the murals downtown, and those are 80-foot long murals. So I guess I go as large as 80, but with my own work, I go as large as 12 feet. And it's much harder to work large. It's much more simple to work on a small canvas, but I do that because of the way somebody engages with it. I want the person experiencing the art to feel as if they are in the landscape, to feel that rush of space that's going away from you, the land that's receding back further and further and further, and the sky that's coming up and racing over your head. And you feel enveloped by the painting when it's that large, when it's 12 feet and it's really around you. It's almost like a hug from the painting. And I want you to be part of the experience of what it's like to be out there, so you can sort of see what I see when I'm standing out in the landscape and have your own memories of you've been standing. These are all paintings that I do that are all from around here. So you've been standing out in the landscape and you've been feeling the wind in your hair and the sky racing over top. So I hope that those memories come back to you as you're looking at some of these paintings. And when a painting goes off to a collector or a collection, it's interesting because you see how somebody else views the paintings. If you go into somebody's home and they have taken one piece by somebody and one piece by somebody else and one piece by somebody else, you see them in a way that is affected by the person who arranged them in their home. Or if you go to a museum, sometimes they'll have a wing of somebody very famous's collection of art, and it helps you understand those paintings in a different way, in a way that somebody else has seen them, what aspects that they see in them. Because we all develop our own relationships with paintings, and hopefully a good painting will speak to you over time, that it won't just be a quick thing, you look at it and you turn the page, you keep on scrolling. Hopefully, especially in today's age of scrolling, and we're used to seeing things so fast, coming by one thing and another, a painting makes you stop, and hopefully you sit with it for a long time. Just like when you're out in the landscape, you might just stare at nothing and just kind of absorb and breathe and let it wash over you. And that's my intent with the paintings, is that you can stare at them for years and just maybe you're seeing something new over time, or maybe you're just having that quiet stillness that you experience out in the landscape. A funny story is paintings, as they go off and they go and they have their own lives and their own world, sometimes I come back to them and they're a surprise to me. So a few years ago, I came into the senior center and I walked in and one of my paintings was there here to greet me. And I put it in the show. It's in this back room. I can see it now. It's over the sofa. And I hadn't seen that painting in years, and it had gone off and had its own little life. It had been purchased, and I'm not sure, Dolly, did you purchase that painting? I thought you might have. And it had gone off, and it had been loved, and it had been framed, and then it had shown up here, and it was such a wonderful surprise to see it and being appreciated and having its own life, and I didn't even know. And it was just such a joy to see that, and thank you for donating that to the senior center.
Well, and the funny thing is, it doesn't have a signature, so we didn't know who it was until she saw it.
I'll make sure it has a signature soon.
So now the mystery is solved.
Yes. So that's in that room. So I guess they're playing cribbage there now. But after you said they wouldn't mind if we wanted to. Yeah. When I'm done talking, make sure you wander into that room. So the paintings are hung, the large one you walked past as you came in, and then this room, and then also that back room. Oh, and another thing is how paintings are hung is really important. And Danica and I didn't, I'm sorry, Danica and I were working really hard to hang everything and get everything level. And we are, is it straight, that kind of thing. And I looked at this painting that's behind you of the sky, and I said, well, it looks like it's hung just a little bit too high. Maybe we should move the nail and lower that down. And Denny said, no, I've intentionally put it high because that's how you look at the sky.
Yeah.
I thought that was wonderful. That is how we experience that storm, those clouds that are rising up and rising. You literally have to crane your neck up just a little bit, and that exaggerates that feeling of how we experience the sky. So I think it's really important that the paintings are active and alive, and we are re-experiencing those moments as we're looking at them. And every painting has its own story. And because I paint outside, I paint from direct observation. At times I will paint in the studio, especially when it's a larger canvas like this one, or the one that's in the front hall that's 78 inches, so it's over 6 feet. I do have to do those in the studio because of the Wyoming wind. But even the places that I'm working on in the studio, and when I work in the studio, I always work from an iPad. I do not work from a photograph. It's very hard to see color, and the iPad has, it's a large enough iPad, I can really get a good visualization, and you can really expand the image, and it also has a beautiful glowing color to it, so it's closer to real life than a photograph, which can be very matte. Come on in. And but there are always places, even if I am working from the iPad, it's always somewhere that I drive by every day, or I've done other paintings from that same place. So I'm very familiar with it. And when I've done another painting there, I really understand how it's built and how to use the paint to create the image that I'm seeing. So I can easily paint from the photo and still be feeling and remembering what it's like to be out in the space. But it's fun because each painting develops its own story. So if you're painting from direct observation, and I do that because I love being outside. I mean, it's pretty selfish. I like being outside. I want to get outside, so that's where I paint. I make the outdoor world is my studio. And so when I'm outside, I'm experiencing everything that's happening. If it's cold, I'm feeling cold. If it's windy, I'm struggling to hang on to the canvas. If it's hot, I'm feeling hot. So all of those feelings become expression into the painting that I don't even have to think about. Just like if you're writing in your handwriting, if you're feeling angry, your handwriting is going to be a little bit more aggressive, and if you're feeling very calm, your handwriting might be more smooth. The same thing happens with a painting, that you don't even need to think about expression. It will naturally come through because the mind to the hand to the canvas is a direct connection. So hopefully, if I'm feeling that big space, it's a lot easier for me to paint a large space. If I'm looking, even, if I'm looking at something small, it's much harder to use my imagination and fill in all the gaps. And every time I'm out in the landscape, something fun is happening, and I end up with all these stories that I know that you don't necessarily know that go with the paintings. So sometimes, like, the Western Skies is a poster that it's a painting that sold years ago, and I have that poster, and it's it's nice because it gives a different price range for the paintings. It's nice to have something smaller. But that when I was painting that painting, our dogs, Aaron, my husband, thank you for being here, came up with our dogs to visit me, and one of our dogs stuck her nose in one of those sagebrushes, right in the top of those sagebrushes, making a little triangle in the center, and she got bit by a rattlesnake. that was the end of painting for that day, and became a whole excursion on its own. And then the next day, I was still a little jumpy, and a rattlesnake came out and went right over my foot. Oh, almost right over my foot. I was like, this is crazy. So there's always something that's going on. This painting over here, I really had some fun because it was beautiful hay fields and alfalfa fields, and deer kept coming out at the dusk hour, and they would I'd been painting there for an hour or two, and all of a sudden a deer would pop up and run away, and it would be a surprise to me. It tricked me. I didn't even know it was there, and so I started painting them in, but I hid them in the way that they hide. So there's actually 5 deer in this painting here, if you look, that are just sort of peeking out in different places so you don't necessarily see them. You don't have to even see them or know that story, but I know that story. It was sort of a fun experience. Sometimes when I was, this painting, it was open range. So there's a big herd of cattle in that field, it was a huge area, and they were very curious. And they would every night, because when I paint, I work night after night from the same location. And so they got used to me, and when I do that, I try to always go at the same time of day, so that, the sun is on the same side of the landscape. And so the cows would come out, and they'd come and find me every day, and then they'd slowly meander their way over to me, and then come up and completely surround me. Which is because I'm standing still, the animals have a very different reaction than if you're passing through the landscape. Like if you're on a hike, you're moving, you're active, you're traveling, they tend to hide. But if you're standing there long enough, they get bored and they come out and they consider you part of the landscape. So it's kind of fun. And I want to capture this sort of the feeling of being out there and this iconic Western landscape that we have here. And I think of it sort of like in the way that a John Wayne movie, with like John Ford as the director, would have Monument Valley and these big rushes of expanse. And I want you to feel that and feel, even if you don't know the stories, I want you sort of to feel the stories and know that there's nature is what I love and is what I respect, and I honor the glory that God's world is here, and I want that expression to come through. And when I'm painting, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like at the end. Painting is sort of an open-ended process. It's like a science experiment where you should not know what the end of the research science experiment is going to be, or you will influence the results. It should be more of an open-ended experience and study. And so when I'm working, I might know this is what, it's sort of what I'm going to paint, but I don't know exactly how it's going to look. And I discover that along the way. It's really an open-ended process, sort of tethered to modernism, where I'm laying the paint down and finding things as I go. But it would take all the interest and creativity out of it if I knew exactly what it's supposed to look like in the end. So I'm as interested at looking at the world as hopefully the viewer is in the end. So some of the things I'm looking for when I'm painting is I'm thinking about the color. I consider myself a colorist. I spend a tremendous amount of time trying to match colors and get them accurate to what I'm seeing. Value is a huge important structure for a painting. And as I'm laying down paint, I'm very conscious of the brush stroke, if it's a hard edge or a soft edge. Laying it dry over dry, or has it got enough medium in it that it's wet over the painting? These are all, by the way, they're all oil paintings. So, and I work mostly in oil paints, oil on canvas or oil on linen or on panel, but oils for sure. So with oil paint, we use medium to spread the paint instead of water or something else. And medium is basically a third turpentine, a third oil, and a third Damar varnish. So if you have more of that liquid, it's going to make a smoother hard edge and a smoother brush stroke than if it's dry and sort of dragging. So I'm interested in the surface of the paint, and hopefully when you guys are looking at it, you're aware of that and sort of taking that visual journey that I take as I'm making a painting. Because there's no point in making a replica of what you see today, because we all have cell phones in our pockets. So it really does elicit the question, why work in art and why paint? Because you could take a photograph of it. But there's such a huge difference between a photo, even if you blow it up, a huge difference between a photo and being there. And hopefully a painting can kind of bridge that gap. So a painting is telling the story of how a human sees that place, how a human is experiencing it. So sometimes I can see colors that you cannot capture in a camera. Like, okay, you've taken photos of sunsets. Do they ever come out as beautiful as the sunset was? They never do. But if I'm painting from looking at the actual sunset, I stand a better chance of grabbing, or at least knowing what I'm trying to grab. And I don't successfully grab it every time, and that's okay. Some paintings are not the best paintings in the world, but you just keep going. That's the process of making art. But at least I have a good place to start from. And at least I can see that. So how are these paintings made? First off, as I said, I always am painting from direct observation to start with. So all of these paintings in this show are all from right around here. And we live south of town, so a lot of them, not exclusively, but a lot of them are from sort of Crazy Canyon area, overlooking the Powder River Basin and those sorts of locations. And a lot of people ask, how do I paint the skies, which are really the fun and free part for me. I just love looking up and seeing the sky. I mean, we have such beautiful skies here. It's just the majesty of God's world in these skies. And I just love to paint those. So I allow myself a little more freedom, and they're moving so quickly. It's hard to capture them because they're moving quickly, but two, it makes it a little easier because I'm trying to paint the movement. So if I'm seeing the gesture of the movement or the way it's building, the way it's growing, if I'm seeing, as opposed to just a static image, if I'm watching it grow and build, I can more easily capture that gesture. And so when I'm painting my skies, oftentimes what I will do is quickly draw a sketch on the canvas of that movement, of that pattern, and then taking longer, I will fill that in with the colors and the value. Often I will think about 3 values. It's much easier to paint if you can simplify the number of values to 3 or maybe 4, so you have light, medium, and dark, or maybe light, medium, and dark. And then thinking about color, I think about cool and warm. So especially in the sky, I will look and I'll think, is this mostly a cool cloud with a lot of blues and greens, or is it very warm with reds and yellows? And with the value, I'll often think, what percentage of the cloud is dark and what percentage is light? So I'll think, okay, this cloud is, well, like if we look, I can see the one behind you there. Those clouds are like 85, 90% dark with just 10, 15% light coming in across the top. And if I can lock that into my head, then it makes it a little easier for me to paint that. Because some clouds are mostly light with a little bit of dark, or they're half and half, and that really helps in order to capture it quickly and come back to it later, because I'm capturing the gesture, but then it'll literally take me a little bit longer to work on it and paint it and actually get it done. When I am painting, it's very important to me to find an interesting composition for the landscape. So I will drive by a place, start getting an idea for something I want to paint, but then when I want to really get serious about painting, I have to find exactly where to stand. And sometimes it'll take me an hour walking around, just maybe little steps one way or another to find exactly where I want to stand so that the composition that I'm looking at is going to be an interesting composition. If you find a boring composition to start with, it will be a boring composition in the painting in the end. So what I'm thinking about with composition often is like the geometries of what you see. So if you're just looking at a grass plane that's going out and then sky that's up above, you're going to literally have a composition that's just a straight line where the horizon is. Or like if you're on the ocean, the composition is a straight line across the middle. That's not going to be a very interesting composition unless you do something else with it. But what I'm often looking for is something that will create visually across the whole canvas the shape of an X or a Z or a V or circle. And I'm not sure, sometimes it's like a weird shape that doesn't even have a name. But I need to see something bigger than, so I'm not just looking at, oh, I'm painting a tree and a dog and a house. I'm looking at what visually is taking me back in space. What is the movement across the whole landscape? And I'm really finding that in the landscape. And it needs to look good to me when I start so that hopefully it'll come through in the end. And when I start my paintings, I'll have a big white canvas. Sometimes I'll do some thumbnail sketches. Sometimes I won't. But what I start with is I draw that composition. So if you look at my painting at the start, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to you. It might have like a big X and some gestural movements and some things that have nothing to do with what I'm going to paint. But having that structure of those movements allows, when I put the objects in as it grows and it builds, the paint builds, it hopefully you see that the gesture and the movement, the composition, the structure of the painting holds as the painting develops. And that makes it much more interesting to look at so that you see the space and it's defined, taking you back in space from one movement, one sense of movement to another, takes you around the painting and helps you lead into the painting or helps you see it in a way that's more than just a story about objects. It's about paint and how we see. And so some of the things I'm looking for when I'm painting, I'm hoping that you will see in the end when you're looking at it as well. And often when I'm starting a painting, I will even, this is a little different than the composition, or it's locked into the same idea, but I will divide my canvas into quarters. So I'll find exactly halfway and halfway again, vertically and horizontally. And that helps me lock everything in for the drawing, but also for the composition. So I'm aware of important locations in the painting. Like it's obvious that the dead center of a painting is a very important place, right? But if you're painting on a large canvas, you don't necessarily know where dead center is because you're up so close to it, you don't see it. So if I draw a vertical and a horizontal line, now I know where dead center is while I'm working on it. Because if you get too close, you don't know where you are. When we were working on the murals, we had it gridded with a simple grid, and we even had to number it, like numbers on one side and letters on the other, and I'd be like in block C3, and I think, there's no way I'm in C3, I've got to be in like D4, and I get like way back, and look at it. No, I'm in C3, you can't see it when you're that close to something so large. So having the grid really does help me, even when I'm painting from direct observation, keep track of where I am on the canvas. And it helps me, like, honestly, that big one out there that you walk past coming in, I had to do a grid, and then on my iPad, I put little pieces of tape all over my iPad to mark where the grid was on that, so that it made it much easier to transfer the image up to a canvas that large, because it is hard to work that large. And how do you know when a painting is finished? People often ask that. We talked about how I started. I go around and I look for interesting compositions. And when you're starting something, it can really make a difference if you're like standing here or if you just move the littlest bit, everything changes. And so it's really important when you come back. I have to, if you're out taking a walk and you find a rock with a big X on it, I probably did a painting there because I have to mark where I'm standing so that I can get back not just to the general location, but I want to have like my feet exactly where I was standing, or I have to repaint the whole thing, but it gets confusing. So I will often put a bright colored X on a rock to mark it so I can come back and find it. But how do I know when it's done? And that's tricky for anyone, but what I do is I have to live with a painting. So I hang it somewhere that I can see it, and I just live with it and see, is there something that's still talking to me? Something that's saying, this is not working, this is just irritating me. Then it has to be worked on like more. But what is really important to me when I go back into a painting is that I try really hard not to just work on one object, but I work area by area. So if I were, if maybe that tree there was bothering me, I would never just work on the tree, but I'd have to work on the area. So the mountain behind it and the light on the hills behind it. And sometimes that area starts growing and pretty soon I've repainted, half the painting. But you can't really take an object in isolation, or ultimately it'll look like you cut a tree out of a magazine and glued it like a collage on the surface. So it has to be the area that you're working on. And then at some point, nothing is jumping out and the space is all making sense, and it's as good as I can get it according to where I am at in my journey right now. Maybe in 10 years I could make it a better painting, but today it's as good as I can get it today. And then it's done. And sometimes I'll pull out an old painting and say, I want to dig back into this. And then that's an option too. But at least when it's done, I know it's done, and I sign it when they're done, because then it puts a seal on it and I can sleep well at night. Any questions so far? So I wanted to talk a little bit about myself. I show my paintings a lot in museum shows. I've shown, Aaron and I had a big show down at the Nicolason Museum a few years back called Married to the Landscape. Aaron's, was an artist as well. And that was wonderful. That was in their McMurray Gallery. It was a huge show, and that was a great opportunity. And we love showing at regional museums. So we've had shows over at the Doll in Rapid City, and in shows up at the Brinton and over at U-Cross and at the Yellowstone Art Museum. I've been in group shows there, and down at Casper College. Aaron and I are both going to be in the Brinton has a small work show every year, and we'll have some paintings in that this fall. So those are wonderful opportunities to see works in the area. And then I have a gallery down in Denver named Robichon Gallery, and that's mostly where I sell my artwork, is out of Denver. And I have here in Buffalo, Crazy Woman Fine Art Gallery is where Todd's Barbershop is, and we share our space with Johnson County Tourism Association, and so go over to Johnson County Tourism Association. At the front, it's 5 North Lobbin, and they've got right now a whole show of paintings of both Aaron and mine up that are framed, and go by there and check them out. And up in Sheridan, I'll show at Expressions Gallery. I usually have some paintings up there. Right now, I have paintings down at the Governor's Art Award in Cheyenne, and those will be up through like August 8th. So if you're down in Cheyenne, that's go to the Capitol, and they're sort of in a gallery. Ask somebody somewhere in the Capitol, and that's nice. That's a really nice exhibit right now. It has a lot of artists from across Wyoming hanging there. It's fun. Like I went down for the opening there, and I see other artists from across the state that we know from showing in these regional museums. So we get to have artist friends from all over, and see each other from time to time in various shows. So that's really really fun. And I teach. I love teaching. As Denny said, I teach in Buffalo through Sheridan College in Johnson County, which is over at Bomber Mountain. And I usually do about 2 classes a year with them. I'll be teaching watercolor in October at Bomber Mountain. And I teach up at Sage in Sheridan, which is a great, if you haven't been by Sage, it's Sheridan Artist Guild. They're on Bennett Street, just across from the YO Theater on the side street, kind of behind the foot of the Bighorn store. And that's a great, if you haven't been there, they've got a great, it's a great resource. They have classes, they have an artist gallery, and they have shows, a lot of activity going on there. And I'll be teaching like at the Buffalo Christian School coming up in a few weeks. And I taught all ages, from little kids through, well, every age in between, college, high school. High school is my favorite. I love that age. I went to school myself. Somebody just asked me this morning if I was a self-made artist. I was like, no, I actually don't. I've studied. I went to Yale and I majored in fine art, and I went to the American University for a graduate school, majored in painting. So I have been sort of classically trained, and when I'm teaching, I try to pass on classical training of learning how to paint, not just say, go do whatever you want, but actually teaching how to do it. When I was in DC, it was interesting because I was locked in a city and didn't have mountains to paint. And I did a whole series of paintings on the monuments downtown. If you're in DC and you go to the mall, it's sort of the same as the Wyoming vistas, where you see across these long plains, and at the end they have like the Lincoln Memorial, or so, the Washington Monument or the Capitol. And so I did a huge series of paintings of those, and it was really, really a fun experience there. We raised our kids. Wolfgang and Maxima were raised here, and they're off doing their things, but we just wanted to acknowledge my whole family. And you can find me online at crazywomanfineart.com, or on Facebook under my name, Jenny Wuerker, or on Instagram at crazywomanfineart. Or the gallery in Denver, Robichon Gallery, has my paintings on their website. So Robichon Gallery is a place to find my paintings as well. And on Instagram, which is Crazy Woman Fine Art, I think you can also find it under my name. But I have been trying to put up some more reels about my painting and giving tips and just sharing more of my experience. So I'm trying to sort of launch like an Instagram page to share what it is that artists do and what I do, and just kind of tell that story. And I'm finding people are interested in hearing the story. So as long as people are interested in hearing the story, I will keep kind of recording videos while I'm painting so that you see how I'm mixing the paint and the things that I'm thinking about while I'm shifting slight nuances in color. Because sometimes, as a colorist, sometimes I'll be sitting there saying, okay, well, it's really close, but it needs just a little more coolness, or just the value needs to darken a little bit or settle a little bit, or I need to pair two values that are exactly the same value but are ever so slightly a different shift in color, and that'll make things sort of resonate differently. So I'm thinking about relatively nerdy things. To me, I'm like, who cares what color it is? Just put it down, but it matters. And it's interesting because I think people are enjoying seeing those little tiny, in today's fast world, sometimes we don't slow down to make that perfect exact color just the way it needs to be. And that's what interests me. And I hope I can share some of that and interest you in the same thing. Do you guys have any questions for me? Yes.
If you, when you're working on a painting, do you have another painting in mind that is not quite at the stage where you want to start on it? And then if you're working on a painting, do you have another one that's more or less completed, but you're not sure about it yet. So I guess I'm wondering if you have like several paintings in different stages at the same time. And,
I think your brain works like my brain does, because yes, I do. And I'll often call that leapfrogging a painting. Like I'll have one painting going, and then I'll have another painting going, and it'll get better than the other painting. And then this painting is behind, so I have to leapfrog it and make it better than the first painting. And then that painting is falling behind, and it has to get worked on so it's better than the other painting. So I'll often be working on really two seriously at once, because if I have 3 or 4 going at once, I do get a little scatterbrained. But two is about right for me to be really focusing on at once, but I will have 20 starts that never went anywhere, that are waiting in the wings, calling to me. Say, finish me someday, finish me, don't forget me, I'm still here. And they will get looked at later or not. But so yes, I do juggle multiple at the same time. I actually find it a good way to work, because I do learn from one painting as I'm working on another painting. They'll make me a better painter. I'll figure something out, how to do something with one painting, then I can bring that knowledge into another, because hopefully I'm still learning. Like, I hope I'm improving every time I'm working. If I'm just stagnating, then that might just be time to quit. Yes, go
I have a
ahead.
question. This is more of a methodological question. Take a large painting like that. I have two related questions. One of them is that how long does that normally, in round numbers, what are you talking about? How many hours or how many days would you work on something like that in total? And then, do you use any kind of larger brushes when you're working on a larger painting like that? I mean, what's the largest brush that you use? Because I'm assuming that some of it is just laying out, I wouldn't say washes, but undercoats that, and then you go over the top of it with a detail. And so, 2 questions is, one of them, how long does it take? And then how do you cut the time down, with larger brushes?
So, sorry, that's very loud. So using the brush size is really important. And it's not just to make time, make it go faster. It's also because if I start using too small a brush, I get too detail oriented, and then I lose the gesture and the movement and sort of the big picture of it all, and I get the little picture. And Aaron is wonderful. He always reminds me, he's like, get your head out of the weeds. You getting too detailed. What's this about? And so a big brush will really help me work better and really be more conscious of laying down the paint and not get distracted by the details. I'm easily distracted into the details.
So 3 inches is about the biggest one.
Yeah, so actually that's a little too big. For just technically how I'm dipping into the medium and oil paint. So I'm probably at 1.5 inches is probably the biggest brush for this kind of canvas. And I try to slap myself if I get super small, but sometimes I do and I have to put them away. And how long does it take? Too long, because I wish I could paint faster, but I really just don't. The one that's in the lobby did kind of go on time for me, where I kind of did. So I'll often work by starting with a drawing, starting with my compositional sketches underneath, let me back up one more step, starting with a grid, just a simple quarters, and then a gestural movement for the composition, and then I will lay in the drawing. So basically, then I'm starting to locate objects and draw, this is here, and this is over here, and that's over there, and they won't be super detailed, but I'll be marking where things are and the connection, and trying to draw the space a little bit as well. And then I'll do a value study over that. It's really trying to establish where lights and darks are and try to keep that to 3 values, light, medium, and dark. And then the color comes. And the color is almost never just the first layer. It's at least 2 layers, maybe 3, and in places maybe 4. And so that painting out there, I can't honestly remember exactly, but it was like about a month, give or take a month.
How long?
1 month, like 4 weeks, give or take. Now, this one here has a different life history. Its story is I painted it and sat with it and didn't like it over time. And then I put it away for a few years, brought it back out, and then I knew what I wanted to do differently, and I was ready to finish it. So when you tackle an old painting, it's important to get rid of the dust. And, Wyoming's pretty dusty, so you've got to really make sure, because if you paint over a dust layer, the next layer won't stick. So had to really clean it off and even use like turpentine and a clean rag to get, and if I'm gonna paint over it anyway, it doesn't matter if I damage the surface, but oil paintings are pretty hardy. So clean that off and really repainted the whole thing. But it's the same painting, but it has fresh paint on it, and it is where I want it to be now. So it has this explosive moment. It's a very dynamic, melodramatic kind of a painting with that light hitting that cloud, which is how I experience that. So oftentimes I will start a painting outside and finish it inside. So this one I know it's big, but I have this big easel and I dragged it outside and started it outside and then finish it. And actually this one, probably 90% of it got done inside, especially because I waited for a couple of years and then came back to it. So I wish they took less time than they do, but sometimes that one over there had cows in it once, and now it has no cows in it. They're gone. they got painted out. So that actually has quite a few layers of paint especially on the bottom half, where I was trying to figure out, how to create that space. What's the right expression for that space? So yeah, and there's some quicker ones in the other room. You can see if it's a quicker painting. You can just sometimes they're more gestural and almost have a more modernist feel. Because modernism really shows the structure of how a painting is made, just thinking about the color, thinking about the composition, thinking about the space and the form, value, the surface, how paint is laid down. So that can be fun sometimes, just to leave it in a more open state like that. And those are quicker. Yes, Dolly?
When you're painting over dry oil paint, do you adjust your heating formula? I mean, the different stages.
Yeah, so one thing I will do sometimes is a little sandpaper to rough up the surface if I can. I mean, sometimes I don't want to do that. And then obviously I have to get the dust from that off with a little turpentine rag. But I'm more worried about the medium when I'm working wet on wet. So they say, it's very insulting, they say fat to lean. No, lean to fat, I said that wrong, lean to fat in oil painting, and that is not commentary. So what that means is when you're working with oil paints, you start with your medium has less oil in it, less fat. So lean is medium that is more heavy on the turpentine, or you could even start with just pure turpentine. And then as you put another layer over, you can add more and more oil. Linseed oil is a standard thing to use, and Damar varnish. If you did the reverse and you put a heavy fat medium down and then a thin layer of more turpentine over top, the turpentine layer will dry faster than the oily layer underneath, and it will crack and create ripples. When it's dry, honestly, I sort of consider it like I'm starting out again. I wouldn't start with just a straight turpentine layer. I would always start with a medium that has lots of fat in it. I wouldn't dare just put straight turpentine layer over an old painting, but I think you probably could because it's dry. You might be able to Google that.
you worked in other mediums besides oils, you know, I'm thinking of acrylics or watercolors, that sort of thing?
I do, and I teach a lot of those mediums. And when I'm teaching, I'm doing demonstrations and working with them, and I've worked with them in the past. But at this point in time with my own art, I only work in oils. That's the only thing that I show, and that's what I love. If I'm working in acrylics, it drives me crazy because they dry too fast.
Dry so fast.
Yeah, I get irritated. I want nothing to do with them. But I teach in acrylics because that's easy for students to start with. So I'll be using them to do demonstrations and whatnot. And in watercolors, I teach a lot of watercolors, and I have to be using them all the time for that. But I don't go out and do my own watercolors. I'm just not interested in it. And it would just be sort of a distraction at this
I
point.
was told once by an artist that the only thing that sells really is oil paint. You can't sell watercolors for a comparative price at all, even though a lot of them are really beautiful, you know,
Yeah.
and I don't know, but
Well, some people sell their watercolors for a lot, but I don't know. It's what I do. And yeah, I wouldn't, talking about selling them, I mean, right now I'm at a point where especially with large canvases, I hesitate to do huge canvases if I don't know that I have an outlet to sell them because they become a storage problem. And I do want to sell them. I don't want clutter. Just what do you do with a 12-foot painting? You have to have somewhere to have an outlet, and I want them to have an outlet. I want them to have a life. It would be sad to me if they just stayed in my basement. That would be not sharing anything. I want to share these with the world. Yes.
When you're painting outside, what does your setup look like? And how much stuff are you laying around? And how does that work?
So the only time I might use watercolor, which I don't really do, is if I were like camping, but I'm kind of done camping. But, so I do have to lug stuff around. And so I drive. I only have a school bus. I have a painting school bus that I should have told you about. It's a little short bus, and Aaron painted it tan. So if you see me in my tan school bus out there, that's what I once.
Huh.
I once was out painting, and one of the sheriff deputies came by. And he's like, "Oh, it's you, Jenny. Oh, thank God. I thought it was going to be one of these." It's like camper. He's like, "Oh, phew." And then we talked for like an hour or so. It was like, because it looks a little hillbilly, but it's great because I could put that large easel that I was talking about. I had a really big easel, and that doesn't really fit very well in my car. So when I want to go out with my big easel and a huge canvas, I throw everything in that school bus, and it's great because sometimes the rain starts and then the rain stops in like half an hour. So I can throw everything in the school bus and try to like paint a little bit or twiddle my thumbs and then pull it all back out. And after the rain has passed, and I can keep painting. Or sometimes I will situate the painting behind the bus so that the wind hits the bus instead of hitting me first, and that buys me a lot of time when that wind is picking up. And then I can get those very dramatic skies, because that's when you want to be out there painting, is when all of that activity is happening. But that's also when everything blows down the road. So yeah, so what I usually do is I have like a Home Depot kit that I've actually had to buy 2 of them, which is good because now it's a taller kit and they're stackables. And I have all of my paints and my supplies are in that. And then once I pull everything out, it's like a little tabletop. It's like a little flat podium that I can put my palette on and have some workspace up high. Sometimes I'm crouching down to get things, but it's nice to have that. It's like a little stackable thing with wheels. That is great. And then a collapsible easel to put the painting on. And then the painting itself is really the hardest thing to schlep around because especially after it's wet. So oil paint doesn't dry right away. It actually doesn't evaporate. It sublimates. So the oil it has to oxidize. I'm not sure if sublimate is the right word. It oxidizes is the word. The oil just has to change states, but it's not really evaporating. So it can take like a week or two for an oil painting to dry. So when I'm taking paintings home, I have to be really careful, not only not to get paint all over everything else, but not to touch the surface and damage it, because it's very tenuous while it's wet. You don't want to touch it. You had a question.
I just wondered, I love your landscapes, but I just wondered, have you always done landscapes? What direct, or why that direction, and did you start with any other?
Yes, so in school, you're forced to do everything, which is good. So I've done the figure and, had to do everything, lots of still lives. But I've always loved the landscape because I like being out in the landscape, and it's to me much more interesting than painting in the studio. I get kind of claustrophobic and bored in the studio. So for me, it's more interesting to be outside. And then the subject matter for me, what I'm drawn to in Wyoming is the landscape. That is the story that to me is really important to tell. I suppose, other stories, certainly you could tell the rodeo story and you'd have a lot of fertile subject matter there. But the story that I'm telling is the light hitting the land and the movement of the clouds over the sky. When I'm driving, I'm dangerously looking at the sky back to the road, but it's, so what's pulling me is, and that beauty is the story that I want to tell. So, and yes, I have always really gravitated to the landscape, even though I've done a lot of other things. Even early on in my early 20s, I was painting landscapes. I just like being outside, and I love nature. As a kid, I was always out in nature, and that is my passion. So, yeah.
And the detail.
Well, thank you very much. Any other questions? Well, yes.
Do you ever have a color palette in mind that you want to explore and then go out and look for a subject that fits your preconceived image of what you want to accomplish?
Not really. This painting here, I was thinking this cool blue and allowing it to be very, very cool. But that was really after I started the painting that I realized this was going in that direction, and I allowed it to become more that way. The painting that's in the main room out there, I was aware that it was also going to be a very cool painting with greens and blues, and sometimes a painting will be much warmer. And I was more aware that was what it was going to be and conscious of it. And then I was thinking, like, in the center, there's this glowing orb of light where the sun is hitting a big cloud. And I was aware while I was working on it that was really going to be the most warmth in that painting. And I thought that would be a nice contrast with all the coolness around it. And then I intentionally brought a little more warmth into the landscape so that it wasn't like isolated in that cloud. And I made sure there was some warmth in the ground in those colors. It's sort of underneath. Oh, actually, I forgot this when I am working. Sometimes, not always, I will put a ground down before I do anything. And the ground is a very thin layer of color. And I intentionally put like an orangey ground color because I knew it was going to have a lot of blue over top, and that would be the opposite color. And so it would create a little vibration visually where it peeks through. And it's going to peek through randomly here or there. And where it does peek through, it'll make a nice contrast. So I intentionally, that whole painting was very yellow, to like orangey to start with. And then, and so I knew that it was going to become cool over that. And then I allowed some to show through, and I also intentionally added a few places of warmth. Not a lot, just a little accent. Yes.
One other question. A lot of the older painters, like say in the 1800s, they used to put they didn't start with a white canvas. They don't, completely lay it down something like yellow or.
Yes. yeah.
Underpainting.
Do you
Yeah.
ever do that at all, or do you
Yeah.
always just work from white, or do you have any, ever use the black gesso?
Yeah, I
or-
have used a black gesso. So that's what I'm calling a ground, what you're calling underpainting. Is this, I'm calling it a ground. It's the same thing. And so I have worked, you can buy black canvases like at Hobby Lobby. And I've worked on those and they're kind of fun. I haven't worked on those a lot. And the reason is because the oil paintings allow light through the surface. They allow light to penetrate, sort of like bird feathers. So light goes through the first layer of oil paint and it goes through the next layer and the next layer and however many layers, then it hits the white ground and it turns around and it bounces back out. So like the way a bird feather can be iridescent and oil painting can have a bit of multiplicity in the color, because that light goes in, it hits that white ground and it comes back out. So if you work on a black ground, it doesn't have that opportunity to bounce that light back. So what I prefer to do is take a white canvas and I put a thin ground. So when I'm talking about how that was sort of an orangey color, it's a very thin translucent color that I lay down with a lot of turpentine. Actually, that first layer is just oil paint and turpentine and nothing else. And that makes a really nice translucent layer to work off of. And it keeps its luminosity in the end. The black is really fun to work against, but I would be scared it would make it a little dull in the end. So I've only done a few kind of studies, just studies on those. So, but it's all good. If you want to work on black, I had a hoot when I worked on them because you're thinking backwards. So you're adding, instead of adding darks, you're adding your lights. So it's kind of fun. Using a ground usually would be a middle value. And so you're pushing your darks and pulling your lights and working in both directions at the same time, which is kind of a really nice way to work. Questions? Well, I thank you guys for taking it has been an hour. I promised you it'd be 40 minutes, but it's been an hour. Thank you guys for coming, and I hope you'll take a look in that room before you slip out, and I hope to see you again soon and swing by the senior center again soon.
I'll just let you know, we have this blueberry coffee cake here if you want to take a piece, and you can mosey around the paintings, and I'll unplug this and get rid of some of our hazards. Thank you.
Blueberry coffee cake. Did I turn that on?
Oh, yeah, that was standby. So okay, now it's on. There's standby too. Thank you so much. Where's what? It's still alive?
I'll catch up with you about that newspaper thing.
Okay.
And, you don't want to take time.
This is
now,
weird.
So, but we do have to strategize a little bit from here. So. Are you in Monday? Do you have your sketching class Monday?
Yeah. Are you? Why aren't you in that class?
I don't know.